As the Arab Spring spread throughout the Middle East, it appears that the domino effect it brought about has affected more than just Eastern countries. Inspired by mass protests in Egypt, Adbusters ran an ad in mid-July calling for 20,000 protesters to gather on Wall Street by September 17. They called the movement Occupy Wall Street. Since then, the movement of Wall Street has spread all over North America, through various states, and to Canada. As the movement continues to spread, many questions are raised about the intentions and the demands of the protesters. A website was formed on July 14, introducing the organizers of Occupy Wall Street. It simply stated that the organizers were planning to occupy Wall Street because it belonged to the people. Further intentions and demand of the protesters were still vague. In mid-August, a group known as Anonymous joined the Occupy Wall Street movement. Anonymous is an online group of hackers with unknown identities. They have been linked to online hacking crimes such as WikiLeaks. Anonymous powered a heavy online social media campaign to attract attention to the Occupy Wall Street movement. As September 17 grew nearer, the Occupy Wall Street founders attempted to make their intentions even more clear. The OWS website explained that the intention of Occupy Wall Street was to create a movement that objected the capitalist corruption of Wall Street. The movement was created to serve as a voice for the American people who were in debt and barely had enough to eat.
They're just doing the reverse of Robin Hood. They're stealing from the poor who need all their things to live and giving it all to the rich. Makes no sense.
The Occupy Wall Street movement is a product of the 2008 financial crisis. The financial crisis was triggered by an interplay of valuation and liquidity problems in the banking systems of the United States. Reports show that the financial crisis was not a natural disaster. Instead, the crisis was a result of high-risk complex financial products and undisclosed conflicts of interests. Governments responded to the bankruptcy of banks by bailing them out instead of punishing them. As an aftermath of the financial crisis, the United States is seeing the middle class disappear, leaving only a wide gap between the rich and the poor. In light of this, the OWS movement started an online website titled We Are the 99%. The name comes from the idea that 1% of America owns the majority of the money in the United States, leaving the remaining 99% of Americans with very little money, no jobs, no homes, and struggling to find food. The project calls for Americans to share their stories and explain how they are part of the 99%.
There's a hopelessness that's descended upon people. And that hopelessness, it crushes dignity. And there's only so far that the human dignity can actually be crushed before it says that's enough. And we're reaching that point. We're seeing it happen all over the world. It's an explosion.
From the Arab Spring.
Everywhere, from the Arab Spring to most of the Middle East now, to what we're seeing happening in Europe. There's a deep sense of inequality. There's a deep sense that there's a elite few who are calling the shots for the rest of us. And whoever that is, or however that manifests itself, we're still in the conversation about it. But we have to come together and acknowledge where we're at, what we're grieving about.
On September 17, thousands of people gathered in Zuccotti Park and began to camp out. The protesters were virtually ignored by the media at first. Many media stations called the protesters homeless bums who are simply lazy and do not look for jobs. Some stations believed that the protesters were simply anti-capitalists looking for trouble. Days passed and the protesters continued to camp out in Zuccotti Park. When the media noticed that the protesters weren't going anywhere, they began to give them a little more attention. As police rioting started, the media gave more attention to the Occupy Wall Street protesters. Media attention spread like wildfire, and reports of how police officers mistreat citizens spread quickly. As media attention grew, what the protesters wanted became clear. There are no demands as of yet. The Occupy Wall Street protesters are gathered to draw attention to the corruption of Wall Street and the needs of the people. Within the camps, they make decisions by using human microphone methods and meeting in large groups to meet consensus. There is no leader. Everyone comes with their own ideas and methods, and everyone is cooperating to find the best solution for the next steps. Even religious groups have joined the protesters.
They start now to reach out and join this movement because it's what we believe in.
The Occupy Wall Street movement has spread to Los Angeles, Chicago, and other cities. However, the action on Wall Street has begun to die down as more and more people go home, gathering only at night. If the protesters expect to see results for their movement, they must hold strong like the protesters on Tahrir Square. The American people are frustrated, and it is this frustration and anger that will help them gain their freedom from debt and poverty. Will the anti-capitalist movement become an anarchist movement? Perhaps as Americans realize the meaning of anarchy and the embodiment of it in the OWS movement, they will lean towards an anarchist answer. The OWS protesters already ignore the legitimacy of legal orders, such as the fact that they refuse to leave Zuccotti Park. They also refuse to make demands to politicians because they refuse to recognize the power and the legitimacy of these that they are making demands to. This is the biggest protesting the United States has seen since the 1930s protesting after the stock market crash of 1929. Things might have to get really bad before they get better, but the American people have started to take things into their own hands. This is Nur Amir reporting.